Welcome to Hammond's Dream, a classic Jurassic Park build based upon the original 1993 park, but carried forward in time to expand beyond the original 15 species. This park represents kind of my own personal headcanon view of Jurassic Park. It uses the layout of the park as it's presented on the computer monitors in the film, but it ignores the paddock labels, which make no sense. Instead, I designed the paddock layout of the tour based upon the events as they're seen in the film. That way, events can actually play out kind of in a reasonable manner, which is just, it's not something you can really achieve if you actually use the paddock layout on the computer monitors as canon. The 15 species roster for Jurassic Park is a little bit debated. I think you can make a pretty strong argument for 13 of the 15 species that really doesn't leave much room for debate. And then the last two are a little bit more debatable. To expand the roster beyond the original 15 species, we include animals, of course, seen in The Lost World, which are canon to that classic Spielberg era, and then we add in other animals that are seen in supporting material for that classic era. In this video, rather than being your traditional, like, kind of in-universe park tour type thing that I've done before, or just a, like, hey, look, it's the park, here's what it looks like, we're going to talk a bit about, like, lore in this. So why don't we jump on the park tour? Now, of course, the first stop on the tour is the iconic park gate. In the game, we need two gates because we can't have the tour both enter and exit through one gate, but it should be a single gate. But we have to make do within the confines of the game. As soon as they enter the park proper, pass through the gate, the first stop is the Dilophosaurus paddock, which can be seen here out of the left-hand side of the car, just like it is in the film, including the sign. Fence is a bit tall, but it'll do. We can hear the hoots. I think I could see a Dilo in the back there, maybe, but... Well, oh, there's one, a glimpse of a Dilophosaurus. Very appropriate to the film that they're hard as shit to see. Now, of course, the second exhibit we see in the film is the Tyrannosaurus paddock. Which you can see here with Rexy sleeping over there, it looks like. Now, the maps on the computer monitors would lead you to believe this was on the far side of the park, which does not make much sense, given that, you know, it was the second stop on the tour. Of course, the next exhibit was the Triceratops paddock, which is seen here. Although we see no sign of Triceratops at the moment. We have added additional species to these paddocks. In the Triceratops paddock, Pachycephalosaurus, Microceratus. And here, on the other side of the car, we have made this the primary herbivore paddock. So this specifically is motivated by the script and some of the background information for the film and design, where they intended to have, at one stage, at least an herbivore paddock that you have to go through to get to the carnivores. And so it kind of made sense to mimic that. There's the very large paddock at the south of the map, which is usually labeled the Gallimimus paddock, because that's what it's labeled on the computer monitors. I have opted to make this the large herbivore paddock. This paddock includes the Brachiosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Corythosaurus out of the original 15 species, Gallimimus 2, and then in terms of a few additional animals, we've added Maiasaura in here, and Apatosaurus as well, both of which were present on Sorna in The Lost World. Although the Apatosaurus is a little bit debatable because the bones that are seen, that are usually considered Apatosaurus, are not definitively labeled as Apatosaurus in any official capacity. They're just, that's what people have interpreted them as. Yeah, here we could see part of the Triceratops herd as we reach the end of the enclosure. The next paddock we enter is a small carnivore paddock. This is labeled the Velciraptor paddock on the map. For the purpose of this park build, I have opted to make this the Segisaurus paddock. You can see a few of them running past there. Color palette I've chosen for the Stegosaurus is based off the Jurassic Park Institute design for the Stegosaurus, which is the only time it has ever had a representation in the franchise before this DLC. That brings us to the reserve paddock. The reserve paddock, as it is labeled again on the computer monitor maps, is usually considered to be the Baryonyx paddock. I have opted to keep that. We could see in the distance over there a large lake with the Baryonyx. We saw one walking past a little bit. We'll see if, yeah, there it is. These are green Baryonyx with a red head. This is a modded version of the Baryonyx based upon the Kenner toy line from 1993, which seems pretty appropriate for a 1993 version of the Baryonyx. We actually managed to catch them all out here feeding each other, all out here feeding. They're not feeding each other. That would be quite a show, huh? Baryonyx, of course, one of the original 15 species. You could see a DNA vial in the film with the letters BA on it, which is not Brachiosaurus, because that would be the DNA vial you can see in the film with the letters BR on it. Baryonyx is also on the brochure map, which is the motivation people have for putting it in the reserve paddock. The Baryonyx icon on the brochure map basically lines up with the location of this particular paddock on the film map, i.e. the map seen in the film on the computer monitors. So that's why people have always made this connection. Perfectly fine place to put it. We don't really have any idea what the park looked like beyond the first 3 exhibits, right? We see only the Dilo, the Rex, and the Trike before the tour is cut short. This exhibit is usually labeled the Tyrannosaurus exhibit because that is what the monitor maps label it as. In this park build, it is the Metriacanthosaurus exhibit, which you can see the Metries there. They are based on the Hammond collection Metriacanthosaurus, which is ostensibly a 1993 figure, making an appropriate skin for this build. They're also less gaudy than the website design for Metriacanthosaurus and the base game one here in JWE, which makes them more appropriate for 93. The logic behind this not being the Tyrannosaurus exhibit is that it's way too deep in the park for them to have made it this far in the tour. Because the tour turns around after the Triceratops when the storm rolls in, which means they can't be more than halfway through the park. And the Tyrannosaurus paddock on this tour route is like 2/3 of the way through the park. It doesn't work. It can't be this. The next exhibit here would have been the Triceratops paddock in terms of the labeling on the computer monitors. There you can see Edmontosaurus. The other animals we have in here are the 2 Mamenchisaurus seen in the Lost World game trail scene and Stegosaurus based on the Lost World designs. Edmontosaurus and Mamenchisaurus, of course, were not in the original 15 list, but Stegosaurus was. So in the context of the original park tour, this would have been the 3rd herbivore paddock, which featured only Stegosaurus. It seems plausible to imagine that the Triceratops and Stegosaurus would have been kept separate from the potentially less dangerous animals like the Brachiosaurus and Parasaurolophus and the Gallimimus. We can infer, of course, that the Brachies and Paras are not dangerous because they literally drive up to them in the Jeep in the movie. Whereas, of course, the Stegosaurus only appears in the DNA vial seen as a name. Can't be seen. Oh, Mamenchisaurus tail there in the back. So we don't know anything about its disposition, but we can infer, especially given the interactions within the Lost World, that it would be a bit more dangerous, and they'd probably want to keep it, sectioned off. So I think it makes sense to put it here. The Mamenchisaurus, which you can see the neck there through the tree line, is of course modded, as is the Edmontosaurus, and actually the Stegosaurus is also modded. Mamenchisaurus based upon the Lost World design. The one in the game, of course, is quite different. The Edmontosaurus design here that you could see, whoops, as I swing my mouse up to look at the sky, that I believe this is from one of the Lost World video games. It's either the PlayStation Lost World game or possibly an arcade game, but I think it's the PlayStation game. Don't quote me on that. Of course, Edmontosaurus is considered a film canon dinosaur because there is a Hadrosaur skull that can be seen in the T-Rex nest in the Lost World that does not, well, it's clearly not a Parasaur, which was, and clearly not a Corythosaurus, which are the only 2 Hadrosaurs definitively confirmed as canon by the Lost World. Props, of course, are what support the Maiasaura being included, alongside Hadrosaurus. But the skull scene in the Lost World is pretty big, and the fact that they put Edmontosaurus into the video game implies that Edmontosaurus was planned. Of course, in 1997, this was not actually Edmontosaurus, but an Addotitan. I believe an Addotitan annectens, which became Edmontosaurus annectens. And now we come upon the final animal on the tour, the Proceratosaurus.
Jurassic carnivore, Ceratosaurus, but has since been reclassified as an early member of the Tyrannosaur family,
These guys can be seen in the film as a label on one of the DNA vials that Nedry steals, confirming them to be canon to the original 15 species. I have put them in the paddock that is labeled the Dilophosaurus paddock on the computer maps. A lot of people treat this as a possibly like the main Dilophosaur enclosure, and the one at the start of the tour is a secondary one. Some people put even 3 paddocks on the map for Dilophosaurus. I feel like that's all pretty excessive, and opt to not do that. And with that, the tour is completed, and we return to the park. Now, of course, the original park had more animals than just the ones we've seen on the tour. It included Herrerasaurus, which here is seen based on the design from Jurassic Park the game. They were not on the tour part of the park, so we put them up here in a northern sector by themselves in their own pen. We have 4 of them, which matches the DPG population listing in InGen's list, and what is seen in Jurassic Park the game. We also have over here the Raptor paddock. This of course represents the holding pen, but obviously for in-game reasons we can't actually use this. So we need to put the actual pen in. We have in this pen, of course, the big one and her 2 lackeys seen from the film. But we've also expanded the roster out further to include new raptors that were brought over from Isla Sorna. These are tiger-striped male and female raptors, bringing the population back up to 8. The original intended amount for the park. The whole inciting incident of the film is the raptors being removed from the park, right? They've been removed from wherever they normally were and moved to a holding pen. Probably pending their removal from the park altogether as being too dangerous. Probably, maybe, right? You can make an argument, and I have done in other park builds, that Velociraptor would be eventually excluded from the park, but I've opted to keep it in here. The final piece of the original 15 roster is a pterosaur, because during the dining room scene in the film, we get confirmation that there is in fact an aviary on the island. We have no information whatsoever about what animal would actually be in that aviary beyond one clue in the Lost World. The Lost World features a mural that shows the animals from Jurassic Park in their depictions as they are seen in Jurassic Park. It also shows the visitor center and like the Jurassic Park sign, I think. So it's clearly meant to be a mural that's painting Jurassic Park in universe as it appears. It shows the Dilophosaurus, Velociraptors, I think Gallimimus is in it, T-Rex. Animals as they appear specifically in the park. And in the background, there's Pteranodons. For this park, I have opted to include 4 Pteranodons based on the 1997 design seen at the end of the film. These are, of course, modded animals. And the reason there's 4 of them is a reference to the novel where there are 4 Pterodactylus. Although the population tables seen in the book make that a little ambiguous. There's 6 pterosaurs supposed to be in the novel, but they specifically say there's 4 Pterodactylus. So maybe there's 2 pterosaurs of a different type. And that's what I've gone ahead and done. Put in 2 Geosternbergia based off of the unseen animatronic / maquette Geosternbergia designed for the Lost World, which the design was somewhat recycled for the Pteranodon, although they have different color palettes. The Geosternbergia is a much deeper blue, whereas the Pteranodon is more of like a teal. Of course, the inclusion of Geosternbergia is only motivated by those behind-the-scenes images of the unused creature, and then Roland Tembo's dinosaur cards, which show it as a Pteranodon. They say Pteranodon, and then they show this Geosternbergia design. So I've opted to include it as the second pterosaur species, alongside Pteranodon, when the intention in the Lost World was possibly for this to maybe represent the male, and the Pteranodon seen at the end to represent the female. Or it's just possible that the Geosternbergia design was completely replaced by this design seen in the film, and they're not even intended to represent necessarily male and female. They just 2 different iterations of the same pterosaur design. We'll never know. But the Geosternbergia is popular in the fandom. It has received a Hammond collection figure, so it was good enough for me to include it. As far as to which species were the original 15 for this park, from my personal headcanon, it is Baryonyx, Brachiosaurus, Corythosaurus, Dilophosaurus, Gallimimus, Herrerasaurus, Metriacanthosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Proceratosaurus, Segisaurus, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Velociraptor, and Pteranodon. If we look at a map of the park tour as I have made it, it is, of course, based off the paddock layout seen on the computer monitor maps, with some little subdivisions carved out for internal paddocks. Basically, the assumption is that the fences that are shown on the monitor are like the main primary perimeter fences, right? And there were probably internal fences in these paddocks. Because otherwise, you would have these tour routes just drive straight through the paddocks with no protection, which seems unlikely, and you wouldn't be able to separate out some of the areas. Like, Dilophosaurus has to be at the start of the tour, so if you're not putting it up here, which is a location that doesn't make sense because we know the cars go south in the film, you basically have to carve out an internal paddock, because there's no way to have a south... There's no way for you to look south out of the car and see a perimeter fence with an animal behind it until you get, like, over to the reserve paddock, basically, right? So you can make a pretty safe assumption based upon what is seen in the film that there are internal divisions in these paddocks. And that's kind of the get-out-of-jail-free card to do whatever we want in terms of layout. So we start here with the Dilophosaurus, of course, based on the classic film design. We have precisely 6 of these based only upon what is able to actually work inside this paddock. This is a challenge mode park build. We actually have comfort enabled, as you can see by this compy who teleported through a fence. So we have to make these paddocks completely legal. Of course, the second paddock is where Rexy lives. You can see her here in the trees. This is a modded version of the Tyrannosaurus from 1993. We've also added compies into her pen based off the designs from The Lost World, with a few other ancillary designs from, like, JP3 and Jurassic Park the Game included just for fun and variance. I don't include compy as one of the 15 species. I opt for Corythosaurus, but they both can be the same slot because we only know the 15 species started with CO. I personally feel that it was probably intended to be Compsognathus, but I just don't like that because that's too many carnivores and too many small carnivores in the park roster, and the park desperately needs more herbivores, so I opt instead for Corytho, which is down here in the primary herbivore paddock. Now, in the film, you can see the tour route as it passes through this large paddock, and it has these, like, southern loops. I've opted to make this a second tour. In the film, this is just a different branch. But in game, we have to make this a second tour in order. We can't make branches. It's just not a mechanic. So conceptually, the way I imagine this works is this second loop is kind of like an herbivore safari. Like, the primary tour cuts through the main herbivore paddock pretty quickly. And then if they want to, show off the herbivores more, they can take the extended route and swing down south before continuing with the main tour proper. We have 2 Corythosaurus designs, both modded. This is the Jurassic Park 3 design. And then we have a design that comes from a trading card from the toy line, which is this blue variation. I don't really consider this canon, but I included it for fun. There's an argument that this is a in-gen clone post-1997. I don't buy that because Corythosaurus is film canon as of The Lost World. There is a card in Roland Temple's packet that can be seen in the film that shows Corythosaurus in it. So it had to exist prior to 1997. So I just choose to use the JP3 design because I think that is the one. Now, this design, of course, is a bit gaudy for 1993, but whatever. I think if anything should be gaudy, it should be Hadrosaurus. The rest of the paddock includes Parasaurolophus, both the original 1993 design as a mod, of course, and the Lost World design, if we can find some here. Yep, the Lost World design also is a mod. Male and female. Males, of course, have the red. Females are more just brown. Ironically, Elvis is a female. Also included, of course, are the Brachiosaurus from Jurassic Park. We have included 6 of these, which is the DPG population list number. I think you can also see 6 pretty distinctly in the film, if I remember correctly. Maybe 5. Maybe there's only 5 in the tree scene later on. I'm not entirely sure. These are, again, modded. We got a few different variations on the color. I believe it's essentially the difference between the animatronic and the CGI model as far as color goes. We have Gallimimus. We have, I believe, 28 Gallimimus is the population number. You can't see it here. That, again, is based on the DPG number and is a reasonable estimate for what's in the film. These are modded galleys, made to look a little bit more like the original animal in terms of skin, color, patterning, and actual like design. They don't have teeth anymore, so that's great. We've got the three variations seen in 1993. There's the spotted one. There's the more normal like stripes on the back one. And then there is this other kind of striped one that doesn't really have those little stripes on the back as much. These are all kind of variations you can see in the film. There's also the 1997 Gallimimus, which is a variation of the one with the stripes on the back. Just looks a little different, maybe. It's hard to tell the difference without comparing the two directly. But yeah, that's the design seen in the Lost World. So we just got a mixed herd of those 4 designs here. And then, of course, we have Apatosaurus based off the bones seen at the end of the Lost World in the Workers' Village. And finally, this paddock includes Maiasaura with a color palette chosen to reflect the beige coloring from the novel. Maiasaura has a prop card in the Lost World, but you never actually see it in the movie. So the canonicity of Maiasaura is debatable. However, I consider it canon personally, as well as Hadrosaurus, because if they add props and those props are in the film, even if you can't read the props, it's still canon to me. In the Triceratops pen, obviously we have the Triceratops. We have 2 designs based off the 1993 Triceratops, the blue clean design and the brown dirty design. And then we have the 1997 bull Triceratops seen in the breakout scene in the hunter's camp. This enclosure also includes Microceratus with the blue skin. Wow, the size difference that is staggering. That's a great shot. Of course, the blue design seen in the flashback in Dominion, 1986, would be the InGen design. And the brighter red and green ones, you can assume, are the Masrani era ones. So we've only included the blue ones. We've also included the Pachycephalosaurus. These were seen, of course, in the game trailer in Lost World. We're using a mod that nicely recreates the design of that Pachycephalosaurus for us, since we don't have a good version of that skin in JWE2 at all in base game. After that, there's the Stegosaurus. Nice red skin here based off the Jurassic Park Institute. And then the Baryonyx pen in the reserve paddock based off the Kenner toy line. Another very nice mod. Metriacanthosaurus. Then back over here, we again cut down this pen so that they can't walk too far from the tour. Hammond collection design. More lovely mod material. And then we get to the final paddock over here for the herbivores. The Stegosaurs, Lost World, and JP3 color palettes. They're all very similar, but trust me, there's actually 3 variations here. Mostly carefully comparing the plates is how you'll notice the difference, but you don't really need to worry that much about it. They're all pretty similar. Stegosaurus was one of the 15. You can see it misspelt on the actual DNA vials in the Nedry scene. We have the Edmontosaurus, or Anatotitan, based upon the Lost World game design. And, of course, 2 Mamenchisaurus, seen in the game trail scene. These would literally be those 2 Mamenchisaurus, just moved to Nublar. Another nice modded design, because the version of this animal that we have, of course, in the game is not the film one. Finally, we come to Proceratosaurus, another small carnivore. Let's look at the ones over by the lake. In terms of some other animals included in the park here, we got a carnivore sector that has been added outside of the tour area. This would be like a phase 2 attraction, and includes animals that are references to other parts. Kind of references to like ancillary media surrounding the original park and Site B. First things first, we have a Tylosaurus from Jurassic Park the game as a reference to Jurassic Park the game. Very nice looking mod again. We also have, of course, Carnotaurus. We've included 3 variations on the Demon Carnotaurus design. This is a modded version of the Carnotaurus. The origin of the Demon Carnotaurus design is almost certainly the toy line. It might actually even be confirmed as being based on the original toy line in Fallen Kingdom. So it only makes sense to include the demon version of Carnotaurus here. We also have Albertosaurus, which is seen in Trespasser. So it gets included. Trespasser is a nice kind of like semi-canon thing, just like Jurassic Park the game is. So it's a good place to go for a few like alternate designs and stuff. So that's why we've included those. Another trespasser reference is 6 additional Tyrannosauruses being included. We have, of course, the buck T-Rex from the Lost World. We have the doe from the Lost World. We have the T-Rex male that is killed in Jurassic Park 3, which is not the baby seen in the Lost World. That's an entirely separate Tyrannosaur that is, in fact, an adult in the Lost World. We have a Rex design here that I've included that's based upon a red and black design seen in Trespasser. And we have a red Rex design, which is black on red. So the last one was like red stripes on black. This one's black stripes on red, which is based off the novel version of the Tyrannosaurus and the Kenner toy line. And also somewhat reminiscent of one of the Tyrannosaurs seen in Trespasser. So yes, 7 Tyrannosauruses, the 7 kings/queens of Sorna, all brought over to Nublar in the end. Originally, Rexy was brought over, and then the other ones were all brought over in Phase B or C or whatever to flesh out the full park roster for Hammond's Dream. So yeah, this was a pretty interesting park to build. Really, really time-consuming, but pretty fun. Definitely worked better in the film than does in game. Tours are kind of bad. If you enjoyed this park tour, you can slap a like or a subscribe or a comment on the video or whatever shit you want to do to help support the channel. It's always appreciated. I don't usually ask for that kind of shit, but, you know, you might as well throw out one of those every now and then. They seem to work, so